Thank you for the invitation to come here today to present some of, in this case, ongoing work with my colleague Alina Branceanu from the same research group. As some of you may know, for the past 15 years, we have been collecting data on Spanish public opinion on many different issues, attitudes, behavior. And, you know, at some point, you need to stop collecting and start trying to make sense of everything that you have collected. And of course, this is an extremely ambitious enterprise. It's also, I should say, a descriptive enterprise and an exploratory enterprise to some extent. So not exactly going with the wind of times in terms of analyzing mass public opinion and political behavior, but still I think worth the effort. So we'll see how far we can go, because I have to say that the presentation is a bit heavy in terms of data, so we'll see how it flies. Well, this data I would be presenting today tries to answer broadly two sort of more specific questions than just what is out there. One is an attempt to find some sort of a structure in Spanish public opinion, and in particular regarding issues. We want to do this in Spain, I will explain in a moment, because we think it's a context of important ideological, they've told me I need to stay here, so I'll try to do it, of high ideological and increasing ideological polarization. Some of those at the Institute have studied this, so you are well aware of this specific context. And in particular, we are interested in analyzing what is the role that gender-related issues or attitudes towards gender-related issues play in this structure of public opinion. We do this using the Pollard panel. You have this data available for the first 12 waves, and this panel is still ongoing. So I want to invite those of you that are interested in public opinion data to have a look at this database, which includes many different questions. As a panel that was born many years ago, when things were very different in many ways, and some of the people in the room were present in the birth of this enterprise, things have changed a lot. And in a panel, the questions do not change. That's the point of running a panel. So that's also something that allows you to improve the skill of living with your past mistakes, which is kind of interesting. So anyway, to get into the substance of the idea. As you all know, parties structure their positions. They conform a space of political competition that political scientists have sort of defined using two axes, two dimensions of political competition, one economic and one cultural. The sense is that the cultural dimension of this political competition is a sort of kitchen sink where everything that is not related to economic goes, right? So there is migration there is European integration, there is climate change, and there is also gender. One potential question was, well, to what extent can we really speak about one single cultural dimension, even if lots of the literature emphasize this idea of the two dimensions. Moreover, the two dimensions overlap to different degrees. So sometimes you can even speak of one single dimension that encompasses both the cultural and the economic. But this changes. If you go to the citizens' dimension or level of analysis, which is the one we are mostly interested in, you find that things are more noisy, more complicated. So the structure is not so clearly there. Citizens, as said, are less constrained. So less conditioned by a way of organizing their thoughts or preferences in a systematic pattern along these two dimensions, the economic and the cultural. However, there are some variations. So for example, more sophisticated voters are more structured. Or if you are in a context of high polarization, you also become more structured, okay? So there is variation here in the extent of this noise. And you also have these debates about whether it's one dimension is enough, you need 2 dimensions, or sometimes you need even more than 2 dimensions. Plus, there is also the sense that because people are not constrained, so not so structured, they are often cross-pressured. So some people may be in the left-hand side of things for the economic dimension and on the right-hand side of things for the cultural dimension. You have all these ideas to start with. Now, what about gender? So gender was actually quite present, or importantly present, in the initial idea of Engelhardt in the 1970s as one of the elements that conform this post-materialism, but it has actually received not so much empirical attention, probably because the indicators weren't there, or weren't there as much as other attitudes towards other different issues, for example, migration or European Union. Then there is the complexity that gender is actually a term that works as an umbrella concept where many things are included. So there is a wide variety of issues, and we are going to see that, you know, how the distributions about things that we would consider related to gender are actually very different in the population. And past work has found also that gender may actually not align so well with other dimensions of the cultural, with other sub-dimensions of the cultural dimension, such as immigration. So we're going to explore all this. To what extent there is one dimension that we can identify as the cultural dimension in Spain that is separate from the economic dimension, and what role does gender play on this cultural dimension? Obviously, we do Spain because we are here, we have the panel, so that's pretty obvious. But I think Spain is also a good case to analyze this in a way as to expect that things should align. So past work, for example, that looks at the dimensionality of the political spaces from a comparative perspective has found that Spain aligns very well the cultural and the economic dimensions. It's true that they look at the cultural dimensions ignoring the territorial conflict, but okay, let's take this for granted. While in other countries you have parties scattered all over the political space, this is the economic dimension and this is the cultural dimension, in very few cases you find such perfect alignment, okay? So this probably should lead us to expect that we should find some sort of a structure where political and economic factors align. We also know that we are in a context of increasing polarization. We have new parties in the system that appear in the extremes, so that almost automatically increases the level of ideological polarization. The idea is that polarization is also a mechanism that should structure things, should help to structure attitudes. And we have high politicization of specific cultural topics in recent years. For example, we have the territorial conflict gaining saliency in 2017 with the Catalan referendum. We have the gender-related feminist mobilizations in 2018, and we have a raise in the saliency of immigration in more recent years. So all these things are factors that should contribute to find this kind of structure. Unidimensional, if you want, structure, also among the citizenship. Okay, so ideally, I would start with some sort of descriptive analysis issue per issue. I would then move to an analysis of how polarized attitudes towards these different issues are in Spain, and I would take two ways of defining polarization. One way would deal only with the distribution of preferences. So if people are in the two extremes of an issue, that means the distribution is polarized. If people are concentrated in one position, that means there is low polarization. But also a second way of looking at polarization, which is to what extent positions on these issues, preferences, are actually constrained. So they are related, for example, to left-right identification. We could also take party preferences or there are other ways to doing this. But to simplify, we're going to be looking at these two things. And then the third level would be to try to find out this sort of a structure that aligns or orders. I guess we are searching for some order in the structure of preferences of citizens. And we can do that using a factor analysis, so trying to see whether all these issues correlate in groups forming dimensions, or whether we find clusters of individuals that have a specific configuration of attitudes. So obviously way too much for the 15 or so more minutes that I have. So we see how it goes, and then what I cannot present, and if you are interested, we can go back to this in the Q&A. So obviously it all comes to which issues you are asking about, right? So here we have a relatively wide range of issues. Specifically for gender, we probably have more than usual surveys. We have questions on abortion, support for equality policies, support for gender self-determination, for the abolition of prostitution, and for restrictions in surrogacy, okay? We have an indicator on freedom versus order. We have an indicator on EU support for migration in terms of cultural and economic reasons, a couple of indicators in decentralization, climate versus growth, and two economic indicators. I cannot elaborate on the operationalization of all of these, but as I said, we can go back to this on the Q&A. So the distributions, I will just focus on gender. So here we have the means for all the variables. I will skip this. And show you just three variables, okay, on gender-related issues. So this is complete restriction of abortion, complete support for free abortion. You can see how concentrated the distribution is in the highest category of support. Here you have support for support for gender self-determination without any restrictions or requirements, and here a complete refusal. And you can see that here the concentration is more on the 5, so more ambivalence if you want, or less willingness to take opposite sides. And here you have support for the abolition of prostitution and regulation of prostitution, with an example of more polarization on this issue. So all three issues supposedly belong to the same dimension. The distributions are very different, okay? So this is already pointing to the heterogeneity that we are going to be finding. One way to try to summarize this is to calculate the agreement coefficient. It's not the ideal coefficient, but it's enough for what we want to show here. This is an index that varies from -1, where there is complete disagreement, so people are completely opposed in the two extremes of the scale, versus complete agreement, which would be a 1, which means everybody is in the same category. And 0 means people are spread all over the categories. So what we see here is that we have abortion as the category where there is more agreement, and prostitution as a variable where there is least agreement. okay? And a range of situations for the other variables. We could look at the evolution of this level of agreement, which, you know, for example, in the case of abortion, has increased the level of agreement, but for other variables, it has decreased, specifically, for example, for climate change. But I will skip this because of time reasons. Another way of looking at polarization, how related these positions are, or these preferences are, to the left-right self-location. So all the correlations are negative. This is the zero. You don't see it very well, I am afraid. But all correlations are negative because that's the way the variables are coded, okay? So higher positions are the positions that are more frequently held by people with left orientations, okay? We see that some variables are very much related to the left-right dimension. For example, feeling very Spanish, for example, support for equality policies, for example, abortion, and there are other issues that show weak correlations with left-right. For example, prostitution, for example, EU integration. Okay, so that means that also in terms of constraints, we find differences within these variables that we include in this gender dimension. Okay, so for the structure, as I mentioned at the beginning, we take two alternatives. One is the principal component of factor analysis, and the other one is the analysis of latent profile analysis. Okay, so this is the sort of theoretical expectation. So we have redistribution and taxes. We have climate change there as well, because growth, economic growth, is included in the wording of this climate change item. Okay, so there is a clear appeal to economic elements there, and we see that this works. Okay, they conform a first factor and load strongly on this first factor, but we also see that other non-economic items load on this first factor. For example, the economic dimension of migration, which makes sense. Also support for gender self-determination, and also support for equality policies. Okay, so it's a first dimension with an important role of economic factors, but it's not only economic factors that matter in this first factor. The second factor is the territorial element. Okay, so the two items with the highest load are constitutional preferences for territorial organization and Spanish nationalism. But we also see a load of other things, okay? So freedom versus order is here. The cultural component of migration is here. Abortion is here. And gender self-determination is here. So a territorial slash cultural slash gender dimension. The third factor is the integration demarcation, if you want, cleavage. So the two immigration items, European integration and freedom versus order. Freedom versus order is, you know, the A of the TAN, but loads here. And then finally, we have an independent factor for prostitution and surrogacy. So probably the takeaway here is that the gender questions, the gender items are all over the place. The latent profile analysis. So the idea here is, knowing only the preferences for these issues, can we find out whether people conform groups of individuals that have some common pattern, right? Apologies for the amount of information of this slide. Here, basically, the model gives you the number of profiles according to the data. We have 3 profiles that are relatively large, so 29 to 25% of the sample, and we have 2 smaller profiles, which are about 10% each, okay? So an additional profile would be very small and is not that interesting. Although here probably the most important, most interesting profile is one of the small ones, right? So you have on the one hand, the progressives that score over the mean in all the items, okay? For some items, the difference with respect to the mean is largest. That's when the color is darker. But you know, in general, all these people are more supportive of redistribution, of public services, of decentralization, of freedom, immigration, etc. Okay, for all the items. Then you have on the other side of the table, the traditional conservatives, okay? These people are below the mean on almost all the issues, except for prostitution and surrogacy, where they are very close to the mean. And particularly anti-abortion. So this group was large, relatively large, 25. This is a small group, okay? Because we saw that very few people are against abortion in distribution. Then you have another large group, the largest actually, which is these moderates, progressive moderates, really very close to the mean on everything, except for abortion, where they are well above the mean in support of free abortion, and also well above the mean in support of gender self-determination, and a little bit below the mean in terms of surrogacy. So, although they are progressives and more left-wing people are more in support of not allowing surrogacy, this group are in support of allowing surrogacy. Okay. Then we have the moderate conservatives, which are for most issues, leaning towards more conservative positions, but not so apart on any of them. Fairly close to the mean on many of the issues. And finally, group 3. This group is very interesting because it's more conservative than the very traditionals, for example, in taxes or in climate change or in migration, okay? Against equality policies, strongly against equality policies, but in support of abortion. And this is the group, we will see in a moment if we have time, this is the group where the support for Vox is larger. So, in terms of the profiles, I will stick only to this profile 3. And then we can discuss the others if you want. A little bit more presence of men, less than higher education, right wing is the green line that I am reading. Clearly conservative in terms of left-right orientations. And you can see here, this is the group where the support for Vox is larger. Okay. no significant differences in terms of mobilization. If you want to compare this profile, for example, with this here, number 5, here you have, this is the yellow line, more women, younger. This is the pink, sorry, more women, younger, highly educated, and locating themselves clearly on the left of the distribution, voting Sumar especially. Also PSOE, but they are not the ones that support more PSOE. It's clearly more connected with Sumar. Look at also at the axis is almost all the scale. So to take away, I would say 3 points. We didn't emphasize these descriptives for all the issues, but in general, we see increases in polarization, both in terms of levels of agreement, but also especially for levels of constraint. We saw that the cultural dimension is really not one thing. It's a complicated dimension, and it's either not clear that gender issues work as a single dimension. So there are different distributions, different trends. We didn't see that, but there are different trends. They change in different directions. Gender issues either elicit a lot of support or very little support, a lot of agreement or very little agreement. So there is a lot of variation in this respect. And also we saw that gender issues like abortion, for example, differentiate between different types of conservative voters. And thank you so much for your attention and bearing with me. Okay, thank you.